vision, or have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Jackie, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the Sunday, May 31st edition of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The United States may be the best place to build universal health care, by Wei Zhang. The debate over health insurance in the United States has returned to the forefront as the Affordable Care Act faces political pressure, insurance premiums continue to climb, and physicians experience increasing restrictions from insurance companies. A recent poll shows that roughly 62% to 68% of Americans believe the government has a responsibility to ensure health care coverage for all. Yet, after more than a century of debate, the federal government has taken only small steps towards universal coverage. Today, the United States spends a relatively high amount per person on health care, but Americans die younger and are less healthy than residents in other high-income countries. Having experienced different healthcare systems firsthand, I am deeply aware of how universal health care can impact life. Surprisingly, I've also realized that the United States may actually have one of the systems best suited to making it work. During my doctoral training in Japan, I enrolled in the National Health Insurance Program. At one point, I needed a root canal, and the dentist asked which type of crown I wanted. One option was a basic, reliable material fully covered by insurance. Another was of higher quality but not covered. I chose the basic option, and the total cost for the entire treatment was about $50 after reimbursement. Later, when living in the U.S., I was told that another tooth might require the same procedure, and that even with insurance, a basic crown would cost around $1,000. This experience gave me a front-row view of a primary benefit of universal health care. It protects access to a reasonable care option. By contrast, in the current American system, even the basic choice is expensive. Of course, universal health care is not perfect. Most failures are due to rigid bureaucracies and weak transparency, which can lead to inefficiencies and increased cost while reforms lag behind. This is where the United States has a unique advantage. American institutions are built around transparency, public oversight, and decentralized authority, all of which help to expose inefficiencies and promote improvements. That ability to self-correct is one of the country's defining institutional strengths. Ironically, the current American health system is an outlier. It is often less transparent than many other public systems in the U.S., and patients frequently do not know the price of medical services until weeks after treatment. The complexity of multiple insurers, billing codes, and administrative layers makes the system difficult for both patients and physicians to navigate. A universal system would remove unnecessary intermediaries and simplify payment structures. This, in turn, would improve transparency while lowering administrative costs and allowing doctors to spend more time caring for patients instead of negotiating with insurance companies. With strong oversight and reduced bureaucracy, the United States would be well positioned to identify problems quickly and adjust policies when needed. Some skeptics argue that universal health care represents a form of socialized medicine, government control of the market, or even a dangerous step toward collectivism. These concerns resonate in a country whose economic success has long been tied to free markets and private innovation. But universal health care does not eliminate markets. It establishes a foundation. By guaranteeing access to essential care, it allows individuals to remain healthy enough to work, create, and pursue opportunities and improve well-being. The government does not control every medical decision in a universal healthcare system. Rather, it guarantees a basic level of coverage while markets continue to operate above that baseline. And markets function better when they rest on a stable foundation. When essential needs are reliably met, private providers and insurers can focus on offering higher quality services, innovative treatments, and specialized care. Another concern is that broader access will lead to excessive use of medical services and overwhelm the system. In reality, when care becomes accessible, utilization often increases in ways that add value rather than waste. Today, roughly 1/3 of American adults report skipping or postponing needed medical care because of cost. When illnesses are left untreated in early stages, they often progress into more serious conditions that require far more complex and expensive interventions. Universal health care is a guard of basic human dignity. In the United States, it could become something distinctly American, a practical system grounded in transparency, flexibility, and accountability. The country that pioneered so many innovations could also build a healthcare model that protects its people while preserving the strengths of the market economy. Wei Zhang is a postdoctoral researcher of cardiovascular medicine at Yale University and a Public Voices Fellow with the Op-Ed Project, specializing in vascular surgery and public health. In Everybody's column, letters from our readers. Niagara Falls Council meetings out of control. I'm writing this letter after watching video of the City Council of Niagara Falls meeting on May 20th, a second time, and speaking with a friend who was at the meeting. I love this city and have been a lifelong resident, but I'm embarrassed by the handful of people who show up at these meetings to create chaos. Councilman Perry tried for 2 years to stop this madness, and the current chair, Brian Archie, has tried to rein in these people using different tactics. In the end, neither of these men has been very successful. I'd like to strongly urge the council to consider having a sergeant of arms with the power to eject people when they become unruly. If this is done, then I think people like me who used to attend the meetings would return. Maybe even the mayor might return, but it's not going to happen in this atmosphere. It's funny how a couple of former candidates for city council continue to lecture the council on how they should behave after being soundly defeated in the last election. I do not understand how some people can go to the council meetings, act like little children, and expect to be taken seriously. I understand someone yelled at the council members that they should remember who they work for. Well, I believe the majority of them do remember. It's the handful of people who go to the meetings in order to disrupt the proceedings who don't. Joseph T. Shiro, Niagara Falls. America can return to great leadership. As our nation approaches the 250th anniversary of its independence, we need to reflect on how it is that we have achieved this great milestone. The answer lies in the fact that our nation was founded in an era of great men. In the front rank of those great men was George Washington. Great because, as stated in author Rick Atkinson's volume on the Revolutionary War, The Fate of the Day, when faced with incredible hardships and obstacles, Washington embodied the classical virtues cherished by his countrymen, notably fortitude, prudence, temperance, and the subordination of private advantage to public benefit. Washington wrote, "You ask how am I to be remembered for all this? There is one reward that nothing can deprive me of, and that is the consciousness of having done my duty with the strictest rectitude and most scrupulous exactness." When national crises occurred, there arose in our nation and other great men such as Abraham Lincoln and Franklin Roosevelt and all those nameless patriots who sacrificed everything not for personal gain, but for something greater than themselves. Contrast that with our present leadership, in particular Donald Trump and all those Republican sycophants who seem to view their positions of authority as simply a means to line their pockets and the country be damned. This is not an era of great men, and that is our fault. We can do something about that by voting for those people who do have souls and the courage to stand up to tyrants. They exist. Seek them out. Richard Christus Kenmore. Town leaders should be chosen by elections. There's a pattern that's been occurring for years, but that now is becoming more apparent, and it affects our right to vote for our leaders. This right is threatened nationally and locally. In the town of Tonawanda, the supervisor recently stepped down, and the timing deliberately prevented the opportunity to hold a special election. I've expected and assumed that our town government was and would remain reactive to the community, its needs, and values. But things can and do change when we're looking elsewhere or just not paying attention. And it happened here. The Democratic Committee, not town residents, had already made the decision of who will fill the supervisor seat and lead our community before our supervisor stepped down. The appointment took place with no input from residents. It's alarming and disappointing. We need to learn all we can about why and how this is happening and use our resources to avert it. When we know and are aware of the manipulation by these individuals, denying our ability to choose representation, it becomes our right to say so. What action can we take to end this pattern and reclaim our right to choose our leadership? Legislation can put a stop to the ongoing manipulation and abuse of our rights if we use our vote to support it. Marilyn Suzansky, Buffalo. Roe decision left wreckage behind. Where is the abortion debate after the fall of the Roe v. Wade and the Supreme Court eyeing a ban of abortion pills? Not in the shouting matches, not in the fundraising emails, not even truly in the legislatures. It is in a far more uncomfortable place, the moral wreckage left behind. Supporters of overturning Roe promised a simple good, more lives saved. But has that promise been borne out in any morally coherent sense? Or have we entered a society where women's dignity is being quietly subordinated in the name of moral certainty? Utilitarianism asks, do abortion bans reduce overall suffering? Evidence increasingly suggests forced pregnancy produces more harm, medical risk, poverty, trauma, without demonstrably producing a humane society. Kantian ethics asks whether we are treating people as ends rather than means. Compelling a woman to carry a pregnancy against her will risks converting her into a vessel for an abstract principle. Libertarianism asks a simpler question: who owns the body? If self-ownership means anything, it means no person may be conscripted as biological life support. None of this denies moral weight to feed a life. But moral weight is not moral license to coerce. So where is the debate? It should be here, not who can impose their will, but how we honor human dignity in tragic circumstances. If the post-Roe world cannot speak in the language of humility, complexity, and compassion, then we have not entered a culture of life. We have entered a culture of force. Bill Licata, Buffalo. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. When will enough finally be enough? 10 common negative personality traits include dishonesty, arrogance, cynicism, narcissism, aggressiveness, manipulativeness, rigidity, laziness, vindictiveness, and impulsiveness. Donald Trump certainly ticks off all those boxes. He's also abrasive, boastful, callous, cruel, harsh, and haughty. It's no surprise that so many of his bad acts as President of the United States incorporate so many of those traits. But now we're faced with the details of the new slush fund, and I believe that will, finally, be the bridge too far for him. Remuneration from taxpayers to a rogues gallery of criminals and miscreants, along with a lifetime pass for he and his family to evade previous tax fraud, simply boggles the mind. The audacity and scope of his myriad vanity projects exemplify their true objectives. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. Well, we've looked for over a decade now, and I, for one, can't stomach what I see. Will all of this stand? The country has bent to this madman's whims and desires so far, but a break surely must be in the offing. Audrey Mangan, Williamsville. The world hurtles toward environmental demise. Every evening, the national news delivers graphic scenes of floods, tornadoes, and runaway forest fires. The number of horrific weather events is unprecedented during my 80 years of life. Yet, have you noticed? Not one news anchor will utter the term climate change. Meanwhile, the president's gutting of environmental regulations begets bigger floods, more tornadoes, and faster spreading wildfires. Trump's alliances with big oil, big gas, big industry, and a variety of major polluters ensure that our future will be grim. And expensive, higher insurance rates and food costs are only the beginning. History has shown that a so-called advanced civilization like ours is a poor match for an environmental demise orchestrated by a fearsome leader. Joseph Weiss, Ph.D., Clarence. In the We Got Mail section, 29 letters were received this week. The number one topic was the January 6th rioters. Number 2, the Iran War. Number 3, the Bills ticket prices. Number 4, the economy and high prices. And number 5, local issues. There are 2 color photos on this page. The first photo shows a man in front of the Capitol. His arms are up like a wrestler when they put their arms up in victory. He's holding an American flag in one hand. He has an American flag symbol on the sweatshirt he's wearing. His mouth is open as if he's shouting. And the caption reads, "Letter writers speak out about payouts from the nearly $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund, essentially compensating Trump allies who say they were persecuted by the government. Anyone may apply for a payment, including the January 6, 2021 rioters." And that's who this man is in the picture that we're looking at. There's a second color picture. You see the ocean, and out in the distance, you see big ships. And in the foreground, you see a person walking along the beach. And the caption on this photo reads, "Vessels in the Strait of Hormuz are visible near the beach last Friday in Bandar Abbas, Iran." Readers question President Trump's war of choice in Iran as the global effects continue. The secret to affordable housing is building smaller starter homes, by Allison Schrager. My Manhattan apartment is about 800 square feet, the same size as my upstairs neighbors, except they're a family of 4 plus a large dog. Much as that blows my mind, I also realize that not so long ago, an 800 square foot apartment for a family of 4 in New York would have counted as luxurious. How far we've come. A married couple living in a 2,000 square foot house in suburban Salt Lake City recently told The Times that though they always imagined having several children, they were now reluctant because they would need a bigger house, which they couldn't afford. Even if they were just rationalizing their decision, there is a correlation between falling birth rates and rising home costs. The average size of a single-family house built in the 1960s was about 1,500 square feet, and homes within multifamily units were about 800 square feet. Now, those figures are more than 2,000 square feet and more than 1,200 square feet, respectively. Over the last decades, households also became smaller, decreasing from an average of 3.3 people in 1960 to 2.5 people today. Not only have homes gotten larger, but Americans' standards have risen. One reason is that the U.S. is richer, and as a society becomes more prosperous, it consumes more and better goods and services. This includes square footage of housing as well as amenities that are once viewed as luxuries but are now seen as necessities, such as dishwashers and air conditioning. At the same time, there's a housing affordability crisis. The median sales price for a house in the U.S. has increased 55% since 1990 after controlling for inflation, according to the Census Bureau. Partly, this is because houses are bigger and bigger houses cost more. But even on a per square foot basis, the price has increased 33%. All of this raises a puzzling question for an economist like me. Why is the market supplying so much of what people can't afford? To some extent, supply created its own demand. Builders build bigger houses, and eventually bigger is what people expect. Another possible explanation is that people are willing to spend more on homes because they're increasingly seen as not just a place to live, but as an investment that will increase in value. And the government subsidizes mortgages, so taking on leverage is easier. The price of a home bought with an FHA-insured mortgage has increased 82% after inflation since 1992, compared with 47% for a conventional mortgage. Then there's the simple fact that there are just a lot more wealthy Americans than there used to be. More Americans joined the upper middle class in the last few decades and can afford nicer, bigger homes. This demand has contributed to an increase in both home prices and homes with more amenities. The key to making housing more affordable is both building smaller starter homes that people can afford and changing preferences so people want to live in them. Building more starter homes may be harder, since the financial incentives are to build more expensive homes. Government interference in the market, using taxpayer money to build affordable housing, subsidizing mortgages, imposing zoning restrictions, creates another set of disincentives. Eliminating this interference is easier said than done, though there are some small ideas, prefabricated homes, anyone, that could help. Changing people's preferences may be easier. There are already some signs that the popularity of slightly smaller homes is on the rise. If smaller homes become more affordable and available, then aspiring homeowners will eventually settle and be happy with them, as most homers are, even if they've got 2 kids and a dog in 800 square feet. Looking to reconnect with family? Try these 8 healing strategies by Susan Shapiro. Americans were forecast to spend a record $38 billion on Mother's Day and $24 billion on Father's Day gifts this year. But they can be difficult holidays for adult children, given the estrangement epidemic. Just ask celebrities Britney Spears, Prince Harry, Shiloh Jolie, or any number of average folks. A YouGov poll showed that 38% of U.S. adults refused contact with a family member. Sometimes it's protective, prompted by violence or abuse. Other rifts might be mendable. Many offspring assume resuming contact with a parent means they'd have to return to the previous hurtful relationships. But that's not the case. Cutting off parents can lead to loneliness, isolation, depression, and inherited trauma, causing damaging repercussions that could result in a younger generation who never gets to know their grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. When appropriate and safe, some strategies can reduce extreme severance and hostility toward your kin. Make a private decision. You can forgive someone but never speak to the person again if that's healthier for you, said LA psychologist Ramani Durvasa, author of It's Not You. You can also just pray for your relative, silently wish them well, or write letters you do or don't mail. You don't have to see them or resume any direct contact. Ask for the apology you need. Sometimes loved ones don't understand what they did to cause you harm. In a letter, email, or text, you can explain in a calm way why you're upset and ask someone to apologize, suggested the Reverend Elizabeth Maxwell of Manhattan. Of course, they could refuse, or say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I had no idea." Or they might disagree and want you to hear their side of the story. You have to be clear on whether you're willing to open lines of communication to see if reconciliation is possible. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. More strategies for reconnecting with family. Gather more intel on your own. Discussing your issues with a mentor, grandparent, sibling, or family friend you trust might offer illumination. Something you don't know might shed light on what happened, said Connecticut psychiatrist Vatsal Thakur. Communicate through an intermediary. Does someone have insight into the problems you're facing? San Francisco psychologist Joshua Coleman, author of The Rules of Estrangement, who reconciled with his own daughter, has written letters to relatives of patients to break the ice. Revise the relationship on your own terms. You don't have to share your location, but consider a video chat. It might be a leap to spend a holiday together, but you could comment on a parent's social media post or text "Happy Father's Day," Thakur said. Find neutral ground. If your relative has expressed interest in reconnecting, you're allowed to say, "I can meet you for lunch Tuesday at this restaurant," said Michigan psychotherapist Judith Burdick, creator of the documentary Transforming Loss. You can also suggest doing a therapy session together, whether it's in person or over teletherapy. Examine your behavior. In some situations, it can also be powerful and brave to admit to making your own mistakes, said Florida psychologist Diana Kirshner, author of Love in 90 Days. It might release you from feeling like a victim and eliminate the powerlessness that brings. Try to have an open heart. Though you may now benefit from a separation, you can change your mind in the future based on new facts or feelings. Rabbi Joseph Krakoff of Detroit asks families to recite this prayer at a loved one's deathbed, like the Hawaiian ritual of Ho'oponopono. You are forgiven. I forgive you. Please forgive me. I love you. This, he tells reluctant clients, is a better way to leave the world. You can even feel relief from forgiving a parent posthumously, though hopefully you won't wait that long. This article is from the Los Angeles Times. On this Viewpoints page, there are several political cartoons. They're labeled Drawn Out Debate. Political cartoonists from across the country react to recent primary elections. So in the first cartoon, there is a banner at the top of the cartoon labeled Endangered Species. And then there are pictures of animals. The first animal is labeled, it's an orangutan. Then there is a giant panda. There is a blue whale, a sea turtle, and last, a GOP rhino. The next cartoon has several men. They have a ball and chain tied to their ankle. The ball is labeled Trump. And the label on the men, that are attached to the ball and chain says GOP politicians. The next cartoon has a big circus tent, and the label on the tent says the Democrats' Big Tent. The bubble over, there's a little tiny person heading toward the door opening of the tent. And this little person is carrying a sign that says Plattner for Center. And then there's a balloon above the tent that says a pro-Hamas self-proclaimed communist with a Nazi tattoo? Sure, plenty of room. The next cartoon is a cartoon of President Trump. He's on the phone, looking out a great big glass window, and moving towards the window is a big ball and chain. The ball has the Democratic logo on it, and it says Senate. The bubble over Trump's head says, "Great win. You beat another one of my rhino opponents. And when the new ballroom is finished, well, we'll hold on. Hold on. Someone is at the door." In the My View column, Allegheny's Forests Continue to Inspire by Larry Behan. Larry Behan has been going to Allegheny for almost his entire life. It doesn't take long driving south out of Buffalo till you leave the flatlands and enter God's country. The superhighway ends as you cross the big bridge over Cattaraugus Creek. It's no creek. It's a river with white water lively enough to challenge kayaks and rafts. The land around you rises. Soon you're passing the ski hills of Ellicottville, then Info Great Valley, and just ahead, the heaping great mounds of the 60,000-acre Allegheny State Park, with dense forests and jewel-toned lakes. I drove there yesterday. I first made this trip with Mom and Dad when I was 4, so I've made this glorious trip for 91 years. Guess that makes it appropriate that the occasion for this trip was meeting of the Allegheny State Park's Historical Society. The park was quiet, just waiting for its budding trees to blossom and for Audubon's Allegheny pilgrimage to burst open the season with its feast of hikes, lectures, and food. Even with all that bustle, the park is so big you can easily get lost in its forests. I know. I once got lost exploring the old-growth hemlocks in Big Basin. Western New York Search and Rescue were in the park and came to save me. Over the years, Sierra Club, the Adirondack Mountain Club, and other environmental organizations have lobbied for the preservation of Allegheny's forests. The land that became the park had been heavily logged and mined for oil and gas. That timber and fossil extraction has mostly stopped. The Historical Society joined forces with Friends of Allegheny to restore the Red House sawmill as a museum. I recall visiting the mill in full action long ago. Waiting logs were piled high, others floated in its pond ready for the saw. Inside, an ancient boiler rescued from World War I blazed as it snorted steam. A huge hemlock log lay on a conveyor, moving toward the savage, shining, 5-foot steel blade as its scream turned to a muted roar and another plank tore away from the log. At the Historical Society meeting, we discussed programs for future meetings. On the list are a Seneca storyteller and trips to museums in Bradford and Salamanca. Here, I had a chance to tell these enthusiastic young squirts about snow snakes and hellbenders that we had for programs way back 20 years or more ago. Snow snake is a Seneca gambling sport. in which craftsmen make and carefully polish 5-foot-long sticks that competitors hurl down an iced course for a distance, sometimes very surprising distances. Allegheny hellbenders are rare water-dwelling amphibians found in the Allegheny region. The Senecas maintain a nursery nearby in support of this fascinating and ugly creature. The Historical Society has a season-long heritage scavenger hunt. They provide a list of historic sites in the park, like the Stone Tower, the site of the CCC-built zoo, Old Camp Turner, and the sawmill. Contestants check them off on a form as they find them. At the end of the season, there's a meeting to talk about the adventures encountered. The Historical Society does excellent work preserving and interpreting the history of the park. Too bad that its Sawmill Museum can't reproduce the scene that I recall of the vicious blade tearing apart a 300-year-old hemlock, but lucky for the woods. In the editorial, Pollution Kills, there's a photo of a boat. It's in Lake Erie. It's traveling along some rocks. And the caption says, "Western New York waterways and wildlife are threatened. Legislation aimed at PFAS and plastics can help." Legislation that attacks PFAS, plastic waste, will protect New York residents. There is still time. The New York State Legislature can and should get 2 deserving environmental bills past the finish line before its session closes this week. Given that more than 200 pieces of legislation have passed both chambers so far this year, there ought to be enough left in the tank for important initiatives that would attack toxic PFAS and plastic waste. The state Senate has maintained a laser focus on environmental issues that threaten the health, which also means the pocketbooks, of all New Yorkers. The Assembly should get on board. These are existential problems that no amount of consumer-level treatments or futile attempts at recycling can eradicate. Per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, toxic forever chemicals, are present in everyday products from cookware to textiles. The Environmental Protection Agency deems these substances unsafe at any level, linking them to a long list of harmful health effects, including cancer, effects on the liver, immune system, thyroid, and on developing fetuses, increases in cholesterol, triglycerides, and uric acid, and reproductive and development abnormalities. A bill attacking the spread of PFAS, S.9073A, sponsored by Senator Pete Harkman and Assemblymember Deborah Glick, has passed the Senate, but remains in committee in the Assembly. This legislation would prohibit the sale of certain products that contain regulated perfluoroalkyl and polyfluoroalkyl substances, require manufacturers of products containing PFAS to notify retailers and distributors, and penalize violations. Is there a good reason to protect toxic chemicals that are unsafe at any level? Western New Yorkers were reminded of the dangers of these substances when local anglers were warned that people should only eat 1 serving per month of walleye or yellow perch from Lake Erie. As reported by the news Mackenzie Schumann, both species show concerning levels of contamination from pure fluorooctane sulfonate, or PFOs, a subset of PFAs. Legislation that would help reduce this pollution is welcome. Another bill that has repeatedly passed in the state Senate but seems to dead end in the Assembly is the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act, also sponsored by Harkman and Glick. The bill's premise is simple: make less single-use plastic. Producers with annual net revenues over $5 million would be required to reduce their packaging by 30% within 12 years. The legislation would also prohibit certain toxic chemicals from being used in the packaging and impose a fee on manufacturers. Plastic recycling is not working, with only about 6% of it actually recycled, according to the Department of Energy. That won't be news to anyone who walks along Western New York waterways, which are lined with plastic debris. This debris breaks down into smaller pieces, known as microplastics, that are negatively impact water quality, wildlife, habitat, and recreation. In humans, though more study is needed, microplastics could have consequences as serious as cancers, lung disease, and birth defects. Millions have been spent by giant corporations to stymie this bill, which has been adjusted, the reduction amount used to be 50%, to make it more palatable to businesses. It hasn't worked. Fierce lobbying against the bill continues. But a recent Sierra poll showed that New York residents overwhelmingly support state policies to reduce single-use plastic packaging in New York, with 73% agreeing that big companies should be required to reduce packaging on their products. The legislation would also save municipalities money in the long run by reducing the amount of plastic waste needed to be collected and hauled to landfills. In a recent op-ed, Common Council member Mitch Nowakowski stated the bill could save Buffalo taxpayers over $800,000 annually. Plastic and PFAS pollution is making us sick and ruining the waterways that sustain us. New York should demonstrate its environmental leadership as well as its responsibility for protecting residents' health by passing the Plastics and PFAS bill this year. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. In another voice, the Stamp Project. Foes of Data Center Overlook the Facts by Thomas Snyder. Much discussion has occurred regarding Stream Data Center's proposed project in Genesee County's Stamp Business Complex, and much of it is false. Non-local opponents have traveled great distances to spread misinformation and fear. They've claimed it will damage the environment. They've said it will increase their energy bills and result in the region losing money from economic incentives. The truth is, Stream Data Center is using leading-edge technologies to create a best-in-class facility that will bring over $500 million in property tax payments alone to the town of Bassam, Genesee County, and Oakfield, Alabama School District over 30 years. This is above the thousands of construction jobs required for the project's build-out, the commerce and sales tax those workers will generate, the 125 permanent high-paying jobs, and the dozens of contractors' vendors Stream will use. Stream has already invested $130,000 in the district, including a relaunched after-school program, paid agricultural summer internships, new high school CAD lab machinery, and new health and wellness equipment. Stream's IT cooling system doesn't consume water after it's initially filled, so the development's daily usage will be like a small office. They've guaranteed no more than 45 decibels of sound emanating at night, on par with a quiet dishwasher. During the day, it won't exceed 65 decibels, akin to normal conversation. They've minimized air and light emissions. Members of the Alabama Town Board and Planning Committee have toured 3 existing facilities. They witnessed quiet, clean operations and made unscheduled visits to neighboring residents. Several had no idea they lived near a data center. Lastly, Stream's energy needs are effectively already met. Dedicated high-power lines pass through the property. They deliver reliable, large-scale power to industrial users and operate separately from residential customer lines. Stream is also subsidized another 100 megawatts at Stamp for future economic opportunity. Stream has come to Genesee County with an excellent reputation and a decades-long commitment. Let's sit down and learn how else they might benefit our community, because the only way we'll lose money from this is if we turn them away. Thomas Snyder is an energy systems engineer and Genesee County landowner. New York's container recycling system is collapsing, by Peter Baker. The clock is running out. I've made the trip to Albany 6 times a year since 2023. I've given oral testimony, submitted written testimony, and hosted site tours. I've made the same argument with the same evidence over and over again because the argument is correct and the situation is getting worse. And still, 220 redemption centers have closed across New York State. More than 43 have shuttered here in western New York and the Niagara region in the past 2 years alone. This is not natural atrophy. This is the predictable result of 40 years of neglect, and the cost is being paid by every Western New Yorker who has ever brought their cans and bottles to a return center, every charity that has relied on a bottle drive, and every small community trying to stay clean and green without a dime of state support. The system is broken by design. New York's bottle bill was passed in 1982. At the time, it covered beer and soda. The deposit was set at 5 cents. The handling fee, the small per-container payment that compensates redemption centers for sorting, storing, and processing your returns, was last adjusted in 2009, when it was set at 3.5 cents per container. That was also the year the minimum wage was $7.25 an hour. Today, it's $16 an hour, a 120% increase. The handling fee, still 3.5%. We at Can Bottle Return cannot raise our prices to offset this gap. Unlike every other small business in America, our revenue is fixed by statute. The state sets what we earn per container. The state has not adjusted it in 17 years. Meanwhile, payroll, insurance, utilities, and infrastructure costs have climbed every single year. We're being asked to operate in 2026 on 2009 economics. And the state is profiting handsomely from our decline. Since 2010, New York State and its beverage distributors have collected over $2.1 billion in unredeemed container costs. That is money consumers paid at the register and never got back, in large part because redemption centers near them closed or because the law is so confusing that people give up trying. The state keeps every cent. The amount invested back into the container recycling system, zero. Canned bottle return in Hamburg diverts over 45 million containers per year from the waste system. We employ 17 full-time people. We've processed containers for fundraising events at Highmark Stadium. We support the Erie County Fair, Ride for Roswell, Oshai Children's Hospital, Make-A-Wish, local churches, schools, and dozens of other community organizations, generating over $150,000 per year in charitable and fundraising value for this community alone. We want to grow. We want to hire 30 more people, invest in AI and mechanical systems, and push towards 150 million containers per year. But without a handling fee increase, that investment is impossible. We're not looking for a handout. We're looking for a hand up. The law is out of date. The bottle bill hasn't just failed financially. It has failed to keep pace with how New Yorkers actually drink. In 1982, the original law covered just beer and soda. Water was added via amendment in 2009. Today, the grocery aisle is filled with energy drinks, sports drinks, iced teas, hard ciders, flavored waters, and hundreds of other beverages, the vast majority of which carry no deposit and generate no return incentive whatsoever. Right now, more single-use beverage containers are sold in New York that are not redeemable than containers that are, even though they're made, of the exact same materials. Consumers bring them to our counters every day, genuinely believing they're returnable. The result? Confusion, frustration, and uncompensated labor for our workers who absorb the anger of customers when they have to reject containers they assumed were returnable. And as for that nickel deposit, a nickel in 1982 had the purchasing power of roughly 15 cents today. For many consumers, it no longer feels worth the trip. That's not laziness, that's arithmetic. A solution exists, but requires courage. There is a bill. Actually, there are several. But the most comprehensive is the Bigger, Better Bottle Bill, Assembly Bill A6543, introduced by Conservation Committee Chair Deborah Glick, and Senate Bill S5684, introduced by Senator Rachel May. It would do three things: raise the deposit from 5 cents to a dime, expand coverage to include the beverages New Yorkers actually buy today, and phase the handling fee up from 3.5 cents to 6.5 cents over 3 years. This bill is not a gift to redemption centers. It's a structural repair. With a 10-cent deposit, return rates increase, litter decreases, and the state's unredeemed deposit revenue actually grows, potentially by an additional $100 million annually, which could fund grants for redemption centers, enforcement, and public education at no cost to taxpayers. For those who cannot wait for the full bill to pass, there is also the Lifeline Handling Fee Bill introduced by Assemblymember Ramos and Senator Sepulveda, which would provide immediate targeted relief to stabilize operations. Pass the Lifeline, then pass the Bigger, Better Bottle Bill. Do both. Where are Western New York's leaders? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Many of the local leaders representing districts with the most closures have been the quietest voices for reform. When a consumer pays a deposit they cannot recover, that is not a recycling incentive. That is a tax. I would ask our representatives, Senate Minority Leader Robert Ort, Assembly Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes, Assemblymember David DiPietro, and Senator April Baskin, to take a hard look at what is happening inside their own districts. I would invite any of them to visit us in Hamburg, meet the people who work there, look me in the eye, and tell me the system is working fine. Western New York deserves a functioning container system. Our communities deserve the bottle drives. Our workers deserve fair compensation.
The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which